These guys are still talking off camera, but that's completely fine.
Sorry.
Welcome back to another episode of our Coach's Corner. I hope this video receives you well and you've enjoyed your week so far of training. We've got some good new topics that we want to talk on again today. Our first one we're going to kick off is how can I get six-pack abs? Rosie, that's a good one for you to talk about, maybe. Sorry, throw you in the deep end.
Well, it's a good question. It's one that I get a lot. I say a lot, by a few individuals. Firstly, I'd always start with saying, do you understand how much getting six-pack abs requires in terms of commitment? And I think that can sometimes put people off, not in a bad way. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing if you want six-pack abs, but just to be sure that you understand how much effort it requires to have six-pack abs, and that you will need to be eating almost perfectly 90 to 95% of the time, having protein with every single meal, having a set amount of carbs, having veggies, having fats, the right amounts for you. You also need to really reduce the desserts and sweet treats and nice things that you're enjoying. Alcohol. You'll need to be sleeping at least 8 hours. You need to be working out intensely.
Hang on, Matt Lamont doesn't sleep and he's got abs.
Yeah, what?
I'll get to that. You need to be working out intensely 4 to 5 hours per week as well. So all of these things, people, I think, you see online, you see Instagram people, and you're like, I want that. But I think a lot of the time you just need to be really clear on what it is that you want. And also to understand that it's not necessarily six-pack abs don't equal health, which is something that's really, really important, and that I hope more people will get to understand, is that just from having abs doesn't necessarily mean that you're a healthy individual. A lot of the time, and this is from past experience for me, like obviously I've got down to a lean like body composition myself, and it really disrupted all my hormones. So it really depends on who you are as a person as to
Affects the other person in a relationship as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it can do, yes, certainly. I think it just
need a minute.
It depends on the person as well. Like some people obviously have an easier time. Just generally, I'm just broadening. What's the word? Speaking broadly, is that guys obviously are going to find it a lot easier to get down to having abs showing than females, because females carry more body weight generally. So yeah, it just depends on the person and your own physiology as to where you would carry extra weight as well. So you might be really, really lean in the top half of your body, but unfortunately, you know, your abs.
I got a real lean jawline, I've been told.
You're just beautiful.
Oh, cabbage head.
Yeah, it just depends on where you carry weight. So yes, you can do it. For most people, it is doable with a lot of effort and dedication. I don't know whether you guys want to add anything else, but I think that pretty much.
From like a performance point of view, I think it's okay to be lean, but you need to have a certain level of. This isn't a golden ticket to be a slob. However, there's an association with kind of how much body fat you have and recovering and sustaining performance. And I know that when people are like really lean, as well as like affecting their moods, their hormones, how irritable they are, and all those other things that come with it, also is going to really affect your performance. When you see like bodybuilders on stage and they're in what they would consider peak competition phase, so they're at the leanest, they're probably at their weakest. Yeah. They're probably at their most irritable, dehydrated. They're not probably sleeping very well, and all those other things that come part and parcel with being that lean. So I know that it's real easy to pick up an injury, for example, when you're really lean. That doesn't mean as if you get a six-pack you're gonna get injured, but we're talking about when you are really pushing yourself to those extremes. Yeah. And it's just, you've got to find that life balance as well. Is it all about pursuing that at the cost of giving up other things? I can tell you now for a fact that women are less interested in your six-pack than you are. But it's all about finding that balance and what kind of works for you. And that's kind of where I stand on.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Is like you say, is really what is the goal? Is having a six-pack going to make you happy? Is it going to tick off all the things that you're training for? Or is that just a byproduct of training? Does it come of that naturally? The other way to look at it is, like you said, is a good point, is in terms of the physiology makeup. If you look at all the different athletes who compete at the CrossFit Games, all of them are in a completely different level of leanness. Camille LeBlanc-Bezonet has always been ripped. not ripped, I mean like in
Yeah.
leanness, I mean that she's always been slated to be in that she carries excess body fat, and if she was leaner, she'd be a better performer. Well, she's won the CrossFit Games. She doesn't have a six pack. I don't think, does Brooke Wells have a six pack? She's definitely one who carries a little bit more body fat than, like you say, the Brooke Ents or the Annie Thor's daughter, or
yeah,
Sarah Sigmund's daughter.
She's
Do you know what I mean?
terrifying.
Like different people have different physiologies and different people make it up differently. Males, naturally, like you touched on, Rosie, have a lower body fat percentage than females. It's healthier for males to be lower down than it is for females. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but like a healthy range for guys is around 15 to 20%. Whereas like for the girls, it's like 20 to 25%, isn't it? Like you start dropping down under a certain number, and like you say, hormones and all those things start to kick off and start to have.
Yeah, I think just people. The question was, how can I get a six-pack abs? So ultimately, like, if it's something that is a goal to you, just understand all of this. Find out if it's realistic for you, if it's something that's actually going to make you happy and fulfill what you want it to fulfill. And then, yes, of course, there are ways in which that you can do that. But yeah, just being realistic with
Nutrition is
Nutrition,
Yeah.
huge. Bottom line.
You can't out-train a bad diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
What
think
about
it's
those
hand in
ab
hand.
trainers you see where people wear underneath their shirt? They're sold on like QTV.
Vibrate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can try
ab
it.
trainers.
You
Yeah.
can try it.
I reckon we should try it.
All right.
Okay. Stretching. This is a unfamiliar topic for a lot of people. Someone's emailed in. Someone said to us, "Hey, when and how often should I be stretching in my daily training routine or weekly training routine? I should maybe say. How often should we be stretching?" Strength and conditioning coaches, what, Liam? Do you have points on this?
Yeah.
There's, like, I think people think like there's obviously static and dynamic stretches. I always lean more towards like being dynamic and moving and incorporating that. In regards to like your central nervous system, all you're kind of doing is having an input-output kind of response. Whereas if you go and just hold a stretch for 30 seconds, like immediately following, you're going to see a small change. But in 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, if you retest that, you might have already gone backwards into what your original capacity is. So that's why we always lend on the more side of dynamic, because obviously you find range and then you make your central nervous system use that range. So it's not about just doing a static stretch and then thinking, yep, done that, tick the box, no problem. It'd be like, all right, if you want to stretch your hamstring, you gain new range, you then need to put a little bit of load through that. And that might just be the fact of doing like a body weight good morning, or you know, just incorporating a little bit of movement so your central nervous system finds and uses those ranges.
Yeah, I think that's kind of almost like the key thing as well, is like doing kind of stretches in the movements that you do often. So like when Liam says there about like doing good mornings and stuff, and that's because you might do that at the start of a deadlift day because it's the similar kind of position. You're not unnecessarily doing like a sit and reach and stretching your hamstrings way beyond that they're ever going to get during a deadlift, because especially doing it like before, like stretching to a range that you're not comfortable in or you've never been in before can just actually increase your chance of like getting injured or something, because you're now pushing your body to a range it's never been to before and then trying to load it up. You know, so it's got to be careful. Like I would always say, if you're ever going to like kind of stretch and like that kind of stuff, like do it after you've trained at least, you know, rather than doing it before and kind of.
I know of I remember an individual who we used to train who was a ballet dancer. She had this, I don't want to say obsession and being in
There we go, story time with Dan.
negatively, that she always needed to stretch. Well, I know for one that she was always injured, and she felt that she needed to stretch more in order to stop getting injured.
Yeah.
But I think there's a balance between being flexible and being stable or having mobility.
Well, that's
the difference between flexibility and mobility.
Yeah,
Mobility
completely.
in what I would read and say it as is the ability to be able to control those ranges rather than just being flexible enough to put your arms behind your head and tie your feet in a knot.
Flexible is almost just the number, like if you imagine like degrees at a joint, is just the biggest number that you can put through it, whereas mobility is, like you say, about having
Active
control and through that.
So again,
That's a key difference.
I'm asking questions to try and help answer this, just to educate. Hang on a second.
What I was thinking as well, we talked about this the other day because my sister actually asked us about how we don't incorporate necessarily so much stretching into our sessions and why don't we do that or whatever. And a really good point that we talked about together was that the movements that we do in the gym, and I'm not saying like there isn't a place for stretching, like there is definitely, and it should be done in your own time. But all the movements that we do, we bang on about range of movement, and that's so important, like how you are moving through these ranges. If you're moving really, really well from day one, you know, you shouldn't necessarily have to increase your range so much, because you're using this range of movement.
You're moving your body for a full range of
Yeah.
motion.
Full range of movement, and that is what all of our movements incorporate. They're not isolated like half movement reps. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Well, like you say, if you want to increase your mobility, or you want to learn how to do the splits, the best thing to learn to do the splits is doing the splits. You don't go off and do a different stretch to learn to do the splits. You keep doing those things, and that's why when we preach to you in classes about moving for a full range of motion, maintaining midline stability or posterior chain engagement, or whatever that might be, when we're moving for a certain exercise, that is still giving you the capacity to be flexible enough for real life.
Yeah.
You don't need the capacity to be able to put your foot behind your head. Do you know what I mean? But you need the capacity to be able to bend down and not lose, like you say, positioning of your spine, or go to the bottom of a squat and, like you say, lose that midline stability, or put your arms over your head and then lose those positions.
It's like in S&C, there's a load of research into like warm-ups and like the most effective warm-up, which is going to prepare you for what you're going to do, and that follows like what's called as a ramp protocol, and that's like raise, activate, mobilize, and then potentiate. So it's ramp, obviously, that's obviously the cultivation of a load of research, but it's not RAFP, it's not flexibility, it's about mobilizing. That's when we talk about using movements that you're going to be doing or loading, and then doing those dynamically, because in terms of like strength and power, it's actually been shown that like doing static stretching is obviously going to decrease your strength output and your power output immediately following. So it's things like that. Like obviously if you feel a bit stiff and you're a little bit restricted, and you might need to do that to gain some performance, i.e. if you need to foam roll and you're going to lose 5% power, but you're going to gain 10% positioning, that's net profit. You've gained more. So that is.
I think like you just touched on then as well. It's down to the individual and maybe what their goals are and what field they come in. Like you say, there's certain sports which require a reduced lack of range of motion. Do you know what I mean? Over things like there's areas which need to be tight.
Yeah, like in rugby, for example, if you've got really flexible shoulders and you go into contact and then your shoulder moves, that's probably not going to be ideal.
Gross.
Yeah. I was trying to think of another sport, and I had a sport off the top of my head that I'd lost now. But like I just said then, there's certain things which, if we're training just for real life and just to be fitter as a population in terms of our general physical preparedness, yes, you need to be able to move for a full range of motion, but just being super flexible but not being able to control those ranges isn't the healthy end. So in terms of how often should you be stretching, you get enough of a stimulus from us in terms of the gym, but by putting 5 or so minutes afterwards in an area which is maybe been highlighted to you where you are limited, that is important. But again, more importantly, you should be spending time getting your heart rate up. You should be spending time exercising rather than stretching. Do you know what I mean? I upset someone the other day because I said about exercise wasn't doing yoga and walking the dog. So I apologise to that person if they'll watch this episode again. Anyway, final thing before we break this episode up. My knees are sore. Should I still continue even though I'm feeling pain? I suppose it
Kind of ties into what we've just said.
Yes. It depends on what is the definition of pain for them. Are they in chronic pain? Is it acute pain? Are they finding this area to be likely that they're getting pain in that area all the time? Yes, you should be training. Depends on what the injury is. Depends on obviously how sore it is as well. And there's always something that you can be doing. Like I want to try and stress first and foremost, which we'll touch on now, is there's always something to be doing. Just because you're sore or you're like, that is the word they've used. Just because you're sore doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing anything. It depends on what it is, where it is, what is the workout that day. But there's always something that someone can be doing to be able to get themselves better for that day. And that comes from exercise most of the time.
Yeah,
most of the time.
You have to do a broad answer because you don't know the specifics. But
it's like I say regularly, like injuries opportunity. So okay, you've broken your ankle or you've got a bad hand. Okay, well that's one site. If one limb's out of use, you've still got 3, for example. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's when as coaches we have anatomical knowledge, so and injuries and scaling. So obviously if something's hurting, say if your knee's hurting, then obviously doing loads of squats probably is not going to be the best thing for that. But you can still hit a lower body stimulus because you can hinge and do things like that. So training,
and that's kind of the key, because almost like how and yeah, you can back me up if you agree, but how we sort of almost decide whether something's appropriate for you is first and foremost just a stimulus, but then also like, does it cause any more pain? You know, because someone could, you could have someone with a dodgy knee, and you say, okay, well, let's try doing a lunge instead. And if they go, okay, that doesn't actually make me feel any worse, then it's like, brilliant, there we are. If you go, yeah, it still hurts my knee, then it's like, okay, fine. Maybe we won't take the knee to do any flexion, we do some kind of RDL or deadlift variation instead. You know, it's sort of like, you kind of work around pain, you don't work through it. I think that's the key.
But there's an important reason as to why we do that though, why we still want to keep that joint active, why we still want to be able to get oxygenated blood to that area.
So yeah, that's the thing as well. In terms of just like moving around it, like you never want to just, the worst thing you can do when you have an injury, and again, like we said, like this is quite broad, the worst thing you can do is just stop completely, because then all you do is just, like it'll like seize up, you know, it can stop getting that kind of motion, like Dan says, getting like regular blood flow to it. So you want to kind of keep that without inducing any more pain than you've got,
like
right?
we kind of get injured for two reasons, either like poor movement or like too much load.
Yeah.
And load isn't like a weight on the bar or a kettlebell, you know, it's force. You know, that's why people can get injured in sports. They're not lifting barbells or kettlebells, but they can still get an injury. So you kind of have to identify why you're being hurt. If you're being hurt because you're moving poorly, then just by correcting that movement, you might experience less pain.
Exactly.
And it's things like that. So you kind of, it's obviously you might not have the answers, and it's our job to kind of find those answers and you know, of that movement puzzle, like why are you getting pain, what causes less pain. But you know, none of us are like physiotherapists either. If you are really struggling, then that some of those things are outside of our scope.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
You know, and we have no problem when, you know, holding our hands up and say, hey, look, we don't necessarily know the answer to that. Maybe you should go and get a different professional opinion. Stuff like that.
But as well, like you touched on it then, that's why there's almost a checklist that we work through when someone has an injury or has a restriction, that we go, right, we're going to scale it to this. It's not like we just come off the top of our head and go, oh great, today's workout's got, let's say, shoulder presses in, what are we going to do instead of a shoulder press? We don't just go, let's do a sit-up, which is nothing at all likely. We go, right, okay, is adding external load going to be the problem? Yes. Okay, well that means we can't use a weighted implement. Okay, but can we still get a pressing action in? Is doing a handstand push-up which still presses overhead, is that going to work? Great, yeah, I don't get pain doing that. Or no, I still get pain doing it. Okay, what if we move in a different plane of motion? What if we do a push-up? No, okay, what if that's still a problem? Okay, what if we did an isometric hold overhead or whatever that might be? There's a routine, there's a checklist that we go through in order to make sure that we're still exposing that place safely.
That's the key thing, is that there's always something to do. So like, I'm sure loads of us get it where you sort of like go, oh, I haven't seen you for a while. So someone coming in and they go, oh, my knee was really hurting, so I thought I'd just stay away. And it's like, don't do that. Come in, ask us.
That's our job at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
exactly.
We want to keep you moving and keep you healthy and fit.
How many people do you know in your day-to-day lives, whether that's parents or grandparents or friends or whatever, that have an injury and yet don't do anything because they have an injury, get better?
Yeah.
None of them get better by resting it. It gets worse.
Yeah.
It gets worse, and the way to tackle and address things is, like you say, is having someone who knows what they're doing in order to get you close to that close to that health again. And sometimes it does fall outside of our scope, and sometimes we have to, like you say, push it towards a professional opinion in terms of whether that's a physio in here, a chiropractor, or whatever that might be. But no,
Cool.
I think that's cool for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope we give you some knowledge. Our camera crew is telling us that we need to wrap things up, so we'll see you next week. See you soon.